Hello and welcome to Console Shock, Retro and Modern Gaming Chat with me, Trev, and as always, Stu. How's it going, Stu?
Yeah, it's going really well, Trev. Really well. I'm pumped.
Smashing the old Robocop. Smashing the old
mate.
Robocop.
Actually, let's talk about Robocop. And I was thinking about this on the way home from work. It was like, what have been my two favourite games that I've harped on about on this podcast since the start of the year? And it's been the Indiana Jones game I really enjoyed. It felt like you were in the movie, and it felt like, you're running around the actual, Raids to the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, all those classic Indiana Jones games. And now you're in, and now the Robocop game, and it's been out for a couple of years. So it was in one of the sales, I think on Steam. So I picked it up, and it's like you're in the movie. So I mean, what's so good about it is, it's so truthful, I think, to the movie, as in, you're doing some quite mundane things. All the characters are there. You've got to, you can walk around the station, explore all the different areas, and
how much? Was it because it was in the sale? Did you buy it for $1?
That's a quote, isn't it, from the film?
That was a reference. I was referencing. Yes,
I'll buy that for $1. I'll buy that for $1.
It would have been disgusting if you hadn't seen the film. I'd be like, what the hell? Would have stopped this podcast right now.
So, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a huge Robocop fan. I haven't, I think I've only actually seen Robocop 1. I haven't seen the second, the third one, or the remake. The remake's probably worth.
To be honest, they're a mixed bag. So one is obviously, one of the greatest films like ever made. It was in my top 3 films personally. 2 is actually good. I quite like Robocop 2. I mean, it's still Peter Weller, who's Robocop. He's in the game as well, which is part of the reason why the game is good. 3 is bad, but not terrible. I only actually watched it in the last couple of years. I kind of put off watching it for decades because everyone tells me how bad it is. It's actually not terrible, but it's not Peter Weller, it's someone else playing it.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't mind going, getting on Amazon and sort of buying the DVDs, and I almost want to buy a VHS player and buy them on VHS, and hopefully they're really bad quality, and stick them in and play them on a proper CRT. But it's the game Robocop Rogue City is, I think it's set between the second and third films, I think I read, but I don't know sort of too much of the lore behind it, but it's really good. The shooting mechanic it just feels very responsive, very satisfying to pull off sort of headshots on people, and I would recommend it. And I mean, one of the things I was sort of thinking about is that obviously last 3 months I've really enjoyed Indiana Jones, I've really enjoyed Robocop, and I was going to ask you the question: what other games or what other films from the 80s, 90s do you think they could sort of bring back in a real, immersive game like these two have been?
Well, you've already got one that's coming out. They're making like a 2D side-scrolling Terminator 2 game.
Oh, are they?
Called is it Terminator 2 3D No Fate? I think it's called.
Right.
Terminator 2D No Fate, and it's literally the sort of Terminator 2. And I think it's the same guys they've made some other like retro. It's in the style of like a retro platform with pixel art and stuff. But it looks amazing. I'm really looking forward to. Also, a fan of the Terminator films as well. Same sort of vibe as Robocop, really, when you think about it. And although some people were like, when they announced it and there was a trailer, they were like, "Finally, we're getting the Terminator 2 game we never got before," because they were all crap back in the day, but they weren't really. The light gun game was the best one it was on everything, wasn't it? It was on like the Mega Drive, and I think even the Amiga and the Game Boy and Game Gear, and the arcade game itself. That was genuinely good. And we got Terminator Resistance a few years ago. That's a really good game. I played through that and really enjoyed it. So it's not quite like, and actually Robocop, the arcade game in the 80s was good.
I mean, the original Robocop game, I remember it was like the best-selling game. It was made by Ocean, and I remember seeing it in the arcade and thinking it was so cool. But going back and playing that now, it really, really hasn't aged well, because one of the things with the new Robocop game is they've kind of sort of sped him up a little bit, because he's all very boom, boom, boom. And so you can, hit, left tab or whatever it is, or left shift to run, and it makes you get around a little bit quicker. And I think that's one of the sort of I think a purist might go, "Oh, Robocop, walks too quickly. He never ran in the films." Trev, you might know that he did run in one of the films, but in my memory, he was always like boom, 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 and just walk around very slowly, and then shot some baddie in the head. But I mean, I think the Terminator, something like that would be brilliant. Or I'm thinking about an actual story-based, Predator game, or a story-based, I don't want to say Rambo game.
Oh, we got that game. We got that on the Xbox 360. It was amazing.
That was made by the same people that did Robocop.
Yeah, I jest. It was terrible. I did buy it for fun because it was like £3 in CEX or something. But not a great
do you know game. What? It's worth a lot of money now. As in 15, 20 quid or something. It's worth more than £3. If I saw it for £3, I would buy it. But I remember speaking to someone about it, and you were saying, "Oh no, it's a rubbish game," but it is actually the idea of the game is like a score attack type game, so that you're meant to actually, almost do the like level once, and then keep on doing it, so you get everything spot on, and then so that was the idea. And I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, well, I completed this in 2 hours or 3 hours, or there's not much content here, and there's not a lot to it," but they didn't quite grasp maybe what the developers sort of were trying to do.
And it's kind of like a light gun, almost like a light gun game, really, where you're doing these individual scenes, like you say, that are literally taken from. Well, I think it just goes up to the third film. I don't think it has the fourth, and there's no 5 now, isn't there? I think it just goes up to the third, the original sort of 80s kind of films. Well, the first one was in the 70s, I think. But it wasn't great. But I think also those guys, they made Terminator Resistance. So
they did. They did. They certainly did a Terminator game.
They've redeemed themselves. But there's those. You had tons of games on like the 8-bit and the 16-bit. I mean, the Robocop game wasn't too bad. I mean, probably the 16-bit version of it on the Amiga and the ST doesn't really get talked about. It's kind of the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore versions that everyone thinks
they're the ones that,
but it's not. They aren't too. The Spectrum version is decent, but probably the Amiga version is the one you want to play, and it isn't actually great in itself. But it's based on the arcade game. But it's not terrible. It's not terrible.
What was that game? What was that film with Steven Seagal in it? Under Siege or something. Under Siege.
There's tons of films.
Something like that. So I would play an 8-hour running around a submarine or whatever, he's on a boat or whatever. You're playing a Steven Seagal and just shooting everyone. I would buy that.
Yeah,
I'd love that. And it feels like you're in the movie. You see all the characters. You've got to do all little bits and pieces in there, and you got to, you arm the missiles or whatever. Then you got to go to the other end and do this, and then save a lady, and save the boat.
Sounds like GoldenEye. You're basically describing GoldenEye.
Because they don't do film games anymore. Because I remember even up until maybe the 90s. Well, you get like crappy little mobile things now, don't you? But
you're right. You don't get a big. Probably 2010s was the last batch of them. With them, I remember there was a Thor game and Iron Man, as in based on the films, and it's kind of since then. There's not really been. There was Deadpool, wasn't there? But you don't get. I remember it was
a big blockbuster film will come out, and then guaranteed there'll be 3 or 4 different versions of a game based on that film, and now that's not something you would. I mean, the other day I watched Danny Dyer in the new Marching Powder film, and I think that deserves a game.
I think most of the Danny Dyer films, especially there's Rise of the Foot Soldier one with Danny Dyer in.
Do you know what I mean?
For Football Factory could obviously be a side-scrolling beat 'em up,
or something like that. They could make that into
Streets of Rage, but Streets of Bermondsey.
Yes, exactly. I wouldn't want to go there.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, it'd be perfect for that then. But I mean, with the best example, I think. GoldenEye is probably the one everyone will say.
Exactly.
Arguably better than the film's pretty good. But I'd argue the game's better than the film. But a lot of those ones in the 80s don't get a lot of credit. They're kind of dismissed. Like I said, I think it took a while to get a really. So there's like Alien is like my favourite sort of film franchise. And
saying that's had loads of games, isn't it?
A lot of games. Most are crap, but we've had a decent batch of them in the last 15 odd years. I mean, even Colonial Marines is actually okay.
I was going to say Colonial
Marines. That's not too bad. Colonial, and then obviously Alien Isolation. Or that's kind of depends which Alien film as well, because they've all had their own individual one. The Mega Drive Alien 3 game is actually a lot of fun. That's a genuinely good game. Takes a lot of liberties with the plot because it would be difficult to recreate the exact plot.
Of course it does, but
that's a pretty good game. Alien Resurrection on the PS1 is actually quite good, and the film's a bit naff, but the game's not too bad. We've got Alien versus Predator, because there was comics. And actually, going back to Robocop versus Terminator was a fantastic game. Probably the best, retro game of both those kind of franchises, I would say. It's the best Robocop game. Probably you don't really play as a Terminator at any point, but it's a really good game. Although Terminator on the Mega CD is really good. The platformer with good old Tommy Tallarico soundtrack.
I love Tommy Tallarico.
Really honest man. Nice guy.
Man. He's in. He. When I hear Tommy Tallarico, I just think integrity.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no one can bring up any dirt on that guy.
He's just like
the Jesus of video games, in my opinion.
Do you know what? He's one of those people. If I had the chance, just to sit down in the pub with him for the evening, have a good chat. Just it'd be Tommy Tallarico.
100%. I mean, if you ignore any of the documentaries that have been made about him on YouTube, I think there's not, he's just a good guy, and there's nothing to suggest otherwise, is there, Stu?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, if there are any documentaries, it's just people that are jealous, really, and they're just trying to get fame. They're just trying to get fame off his name to take advantage of his good nature. The same with Billy Mitchell.
Exactly. The EastEnders one and the video game one. Both of them, right?
I like the EastEnders one.
He hasn't cheated at any video games as far as we know.
No.
But anyway.
Talking
of things that happen on terrestrial TV in the UK on soap operas, we're going to talk about, the theme of the episode has come from a thing that happens on YouTube every March. So I think we sort of did this last March as well. But every March on YouTube, though we're just about still in March, nearly at the end of it, there's Marchintosh. And what that is you make a YouTube video for your channel that is themed on the Apple Macintosh platform. And I mean, everyone knows that I'm a big fan of the Mac. I've been for a long, long time now. Stu, I think potentially you're more of for the last few years, you've kind of come around to the side of the Mac, and in terms of a daily driver type thing that you would use. Yeah. And it's also when we get to the next couple of months, I think April is actually when it is. It's my personal 20th anniversary in owning a Mac. So it's kind of a milestone for me. And what makes it even weirder is when I bought my first Mac in 2005, in April 2005, an iBook G4. We're only 21 years at that point from the original Mac coming out, which is kind of creepy that we've now doubled that, nearly doubled it. But we've gone over the 40-year mark. So it's interesting to look back already, just that statement, the 20 years that have gone from the point where I joined, the Mac bandwagon, how much difference there's been in that 20 years versus, the 2005 to 1984 era, when probably you would argue that the changes were much more bigger in that period of time. But how we're going to explore this today, I thought it would be interesting to look through the first Mac magazine I bought. And I would love to be able to say, go ahead and download a copy. It's here. You can read along. We're not going to read through the whole thing. I'm just going to pick out some interesting things. But we were saying this earlier, Stu, before we actually started recording. The UK version of Macworld magazine, it's like gold dust on the internet to get PDFs
but isn't it? You mentioned this before, and I was going to sort of say, look, whoa. Isn't it just the same magazine, but with like UK adverts in as the US version? No, they were completely different. They were completely different. It's not like the analogy I think you could probably use is like you had Edge magazine here, and then in the US they had Next Generation, but Next Generation was literally just reprinted Edge magazine. It's not like that with Macworld. There was a UK Macworld which had its own team of editors and writers, and the US one did its own thing, completely separate. So they've got two completely separate magazines that are under the same kind of. They are from the same kind of. They're kind of cousins. They have the same. I'm sure they shared a few articles, wasn't it?
I'm pretty sure they have shared articles. I don't think they've been absolutely. There wasn't a wall between them, but they are certainly. Each month would have been different in terms of the content. But so obviously the UK one was the one we would have here. And it's not really well archived on the interwebs. So archive.org has tons of issues of the US version. There's little smatterings of it, the UK one. I've got the physical copy of this is the May 2005 issue of Macworld. It's got a picture of Steve Jobs on the front. And it's mainly highlighting macOS Tiger is about to be launched in the next few months. And we're currently on macOS 10.3 in terms of where the OS is on the Mac. And Stu, you've got your own. I managed to dig out a copy of Macworld that would be interesting for you to look at alongside the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And yours is from about a year earlier, from 2004. Macworld UK. Yeah.
I mean, you sent this to me earlier on today, and I think it's quite difficult to view on my phone, so I didn't even have a chance to look through it. But what's happened? There you go. It's really sort of quite interesting to actually look back and to see actually what magazines were like. And the first thing that really stands out is it's 284 pages. It's absolutely huge. It's a big chunky big boy. This is, and I'm on like the 6th page, and I mean, what's sort of half the interesting things about it is actually looking at the adverts, and you look at the prices of how much a PowerBook G4. One of them is here. 1.3 gigahertz, 512 megabytes of RAM, a 60 gig hard drive, and that's 1,779. So this was 2004. If that goes into the inflation calculator, that might be £4,000. That'd be an absolutely huge amount of money. For that,
I'll tell you what, Stu. I'm going to give you a task right now. I can cover for you by talking about what I'm looking at right now. But pop that, grab that inflation calculator and see what that is. While you're doing that, I'm kind of the same thing that Stu was talking about. I'm actually looking at a page in the April 2005 issue here, and it just kind of an advert for a company called purelymac.com. I'm not sure if any of the companies that we see in either of the issues we're looking at exist, or maybe one or two of them do, but this is a place called Purely Mac. And it's actually a really good overview of like what you could get in terms of the Mac range at this point in time. I mean, now there's Apple have so many different devices. It's kind of a nightmare figuring out which iPad is the best one for you to get. There's so many different iPhones and things like that. This is a time when there's basically the iPod and the Mac, and those are essentially the sort of quote unquote hero devices. And in terms of the Mac, you've basically got the desktop computers, and that's basically just the iMac G5 in this case, which was already at its kind of all-in-one flat screen sort of mode. That it's not too removed from what we have right now, except it's still got PowerPC G5 processor and not Intel. That's kind of the consumer grade computer, and a 1.8 gigahertz G5 iMac is 1,069 plus VAT. And then you got the big chunky desktop power user Mac desktop, which is the Power Mac G5, and that's for a dual 2.5 gigahertz G5 is 1,649. So they're your two desktops. Although you do also have the Mac Mini, which is brand new, I think, at this point in time. The Mac Mini had only been announced, I think, a couple of months prior at the Macworld Expo, and that's 400 quid. That's bring your own keyboard, mouse, and display, but very, very good value for money.
That seems like that seems like a really good. So to go back to the inflation calculator. So if I spent one in 2004, if I bought that laptop for £1,979 in today's money, that'd be £3,506.
Good Lord.
And that's. We talk about all things are more expensive now. I think when it comes to computing, it's probably not. It's probably cheaper now. But I think you're absolutely right there, Trev. Is that Apple? They're quite good, and I don't want to give them sort of too much credit, but for having obviously you have your high end stuff with loads of power, and then you have your sort of more lower end stuff that's very affordable. Because I'm looking, you can see the screen I'm looking at here. There's an eMac for 548. That's probably about 900 quid. So that might be that's actually one I might buy. Just before you carry on with that, I'll give that the eMac a little mention because so I touched upon there's the iMac, there's the Power Mac, there's also the Mac Mini, and there's finally, I think, to complete the whole set is the eMac. That's a weird one because it's basically a CRT iMac. It's a big chunky like CRT Mac, not the flat screens that had already kind of taken over the rest of the Mac line. But originally it was just for education. It was just for schools, hence the E. Oh, really?
Education.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. And it proved to be so popular that they thought, we can actually release this to the consumer, to the public, and have it as a cheap option. So it was actually available for a good few years. I think it got discontinued around 2006.
Well,
but
it looks here on my screen that if you went for the eMac, it's £548, but a very similar iMac, the famous one with the screen on like an arm.
In 2004, it was the sunflower iMac still. That
one is £843, and that looks like it's pretty much similar spec, probably a little bit more RAM and stuff. So it's quite interesting that actually, and arguably at these times, you've got a better screen with having a CRT than what you did with the iMac, an LCD screen or TFT or whatever it was at the time.
Yeah, the gap widened a little bit. I mean, at this point in time, in 2004, where you are, with this copy of Macworld. The iMac and the eMac, wow, I mean, there's not really a giant jump in terms of performance. It's chunkier, the eMac, of course, but you're saving yourself a few £100 there. They both have G4 chips in. One will be faster in the iMac, bigger hard drive, more RAM probably. But if you just want something as a daily driver, that eMac will suit you fine. The one I've got from 2005, the iMac has jumped to have the G5 processor. And it's a little bit more of an elegant design when they went with the flat screen all in one, as opposed to having the kind of the base with the arm coming out and the monitor above it. So it was a little bit of a nicer design in 2005 when we got there. But the eMac is still sort of stuck in G4 on the G4 chip, but it's £459. The eMac in 2005. So it's still not bad, but you would lose a bit of performance there. But yeah, the eMac is an interesting Mac that kind of got forgotten about after they discontinued it. Yeah. And that's the desk.
I think people wanted to, LCD sort of was the future and stuff. And
absolutely, yeah.
And I think one of the things I sort of miss about like magazines like this is, you might go in here and go, oh, you don't know about these programs that are out there, because you'll read a review, go, oh, this program that was designed to do animation, or it's designed to, I don't know, design your house or something. And of course, these programs are out there, and it's almost like, well, how do you come across them sort of these days, unless you're in that world of, because I remember people used to, I know I always talk about the Amiga and things, but the same with the Mac is, lots of people had a Mac or an Amiga and just used the productivity software, for designing things and drawing bits and pieces and, editing video and even back in these days. And, looking through this magazine here, it's sort of fascinating with, they're talking about, the Apple Store, 20 years on from the famous 1984 advert, which, with where they sort of smash through the wall and all the, I think soldiers come out or something. I can't quite remember it fully, but I can sort of picture it in my mind. And
the 1984 ad, yeah.
And I've just sort of chuckled to myself because I think Trevor can see what I'm looking at. But on page 28, there's a you wouldn't get adverts like this now, but there's an advert for an Epson printer, and then it's got a lady in a swimsuit that says Miss Feed 2001. So I don't think they wouldn't have ladies in swimsuits selling printers in 2025, would they? I hadn't seen that.
A lot, the likes of Epson. I wouldn't think so.
No.
It's interesting as well that on that page you're on, I think they're showing that they've just opened an Apple store in Tokyo. I think the Regent Street store was only a few months old, maybe by the time this issue. In fact, it might not have opened. I don't think the Regent Street Apple store opened until the end of 2004. I didn't work there until 2008. So it was already a few years old by that point, but there wasn't an Apple store in the UK at this point in time. You were looking at the retailers that are in this magazine, were the guys you were looking to. And that kind of takes me back to the product line that they had. There was the laptops as well. And you basically had two lines of laptop. It was very straightforward. The first Mac that I got was an iBook. I used my student loan to pay for it because I had a job as well when I was at uni. So I kind of had to use that money to live off and blew everything else on an iBook. That was the consumer level laptop. And then there was the PowerBook. Both models ran on G4 processors. So it's difficult to really argue if you were getting that much of a jump in power by getting a PowerBook, but you're looking at another few £100 to jump to a PowerBook, especially the 15-inch and the 17-inch models. But they just look cool as hell. All aluminium, grey, grey keyboard, grey bezel, grey bodywear. The main chassis there. They look sexy as hell. I've got a couple of them still because of second-hand ones that I picked up over the years. I did get a PowerBook G4 about a year after I got the iBook. I traded in my iBook and a few £100 to get an older PowerBook G4. I think I had a 17-inch one as well, which was the ginormous one. Still a big screen, even by today's standards. I think the biggest MacBook Pro these days is 16 inches. So they're actually a teeny bit smaller now than they would have been back in the day, or they would be considerably lighter, I think, now. But there was no MacBook Air. There was just the iBook. You could get a 12-inch model and a 14-inch model. I had the bigger one. They're under a sort of £800, £900. And then, you jumped up to the PowerBook if you wanted a bit more power, faster RAM, slightly faster G4, bigger hard drive, better graphics, bigger screen, higher resolution screen, DVD burner as well as CD writer. You'd be heading to $2,000 territory with a PowerBook G4. But that was it, really. You had those two lines of laptop. You had the Mac Mini, eMac, iMac, and PowerMac, and that was all the desktops. And apart from that, you were looking at the iPod in terms of other devices that they sold. And in terms of 2000,
I was going to say here, it's quite funny looking through obviously this Macworld, and Trevor can see what I'm circling on the screen, and there's a little feature about a new BlackBerry coming out. So they're sort of talking hilarious. In here. It's like, oh yeah, we're a Mac magazine, and look at this sort of smartphone by someone else. And obviously, we're looking at it now with the eyes of we've all got iPhones and everything like that. So it's quite weird seeing in a Mac magazine. They're actually going, oh yeah, look, get a BlackBerry, and you can send messages and stuff like that. It costs this and it does that, and oh yeah, it looks really good. So that's quite funny, really, to me.
I think they're kind of highlighting there probably ones that are compatible with the Mac, so you can sync your calendar and all that stuff that you could do with the BlackBerry. Probably edit documents. I think you could probably do, couldn't you, to a basic degree. Got the games. There you go. There was a version of The Sims for the Mac. Champman. Got a Mac version. I mean, got the. I'm going to do a zoom in. Sorry, Trev, to interrupt you. Right, in January, the top 10 games are 2004. Number 10, Big Metal Box. No idea who that is. Family for Fun Pack. I know what the Big Metal Box is. It's a compilation. You got the Amiga with like this year's best game. You got 3 or 4 games in a bundle. That's what the Big Metal Box was. Yeah, don't know what was in it, but it was a compilation. Yeah. Then
you got Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer at number 8. Then Rubbish. No One Lives Forever 2. I think the first one was quite good.
It's a good game.
Wolverine's Revenge. Never played it. Star Trek Elite Force 2. Trev, I'm sure you know everything about that game.
Played the first game, yeah. It's good.
You didn't play number 2? The best game of 2024, 2004.
Apparently. Not much choice on a Mac.
Yeah. Number 4 was Finding Nemo. Then number 3, what's Ghostmaster?
I have no idea.
No idea. And then number 2, Sims Superstar, and then number 1, actually this deserves to be at number 1, Age of Mythology. What a game.
Yeah, with the Mac game market hasn't really gotten any better in 20 years, really. Those games were probably fairly recent releases on the Mac, but I think those games are the PC originals of a lot of those games. Had been out probably a year or two earlier. Star Trek Elite Force 2 came out in 2002. I don't know if it came out in 2004 on the Mac. Maybe it was earlier than that, and it just stayed in the charts. But there was often a big gap. I'm actually looking at in the 2005 issue. They're talking about Doom 3 being a new release for the Mac, and this is 2005. And I think Doom 3, was that a 2003 game or a 2004
2003, 2004. It was definitely out by 2005.
Yeah, I think 2003 on the PC. So you could see things would take a couple of years, if at all, to come to the Mac. I mean, it's a little bit better now. You've got little tricks you can use to run PC versions of games fairly well. There's crossover for the Mac. There's game porting toolkit as well. You can actually use these yourself, and I've tried it on my iMac, and you can install the PC version of Steam. You can download PC Steam games and play them on
really?
Mac. Yeah, and I messed around a bit with Control on my iMac, and it ran fine. So that's something kind of like Proton does for Linux, running Windows games on Linux and the Steam Deck, of course. And there's a similar thing with crossover and game porting toolkit on the Mac. But yeah, in the mid-2000s, you were getting absolute scraps of games. And even they might not run that great with the not brilliant graphics hardware that Macs had in these days. A lot of them were AMD Radeon stuff. AMD Mobility Radeon I had in my, it was ATI then. It would have been ATI Mobility Radeon in my iBook G4. And that could run, that was basically a PS2 level, which, well, I guess this is 2005. The Xbox 360 hadn't been released yet. So if you could get a PS2 level experience,
but you can see
that's going.
But you can see it in this magazine. It's I'm on the 40th page, and there's been one page about gaming in the magazine. I'm on the 40th. There might be loads more in the second half of the magazine, but all the adverts, all the features are all about sort of productivity. And I'm sort of circling probably like the fifth advert for a printer. It's like
a good one as well.
Yeah, no, it looks like a brilliant printer, Trev. I'm in this HP Invent printer. It looks amazing, but it's all about. There seems to be a big thing on projectors and printers, and that's what everything. Another page of. Oh, well, these are more modems and stuff, but things that are not. Eh?
It's like a PS5. That modem.
Well, that does, yeah. Actually, that does, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's if you think about like Amiga formats, it's probably something we should do with an issue of Amiga formats.
We could do the same thing, yeah.
Yeah. That obviously had a humongous. I mean, that was a general all-round magazine for the Amiga. It would cover the serious stuff and the gaming stuff, but the gaming stuff was like probably 40% of the magazine. Whereas obviously the market for that was huge. And I mean, a lot of people might get annoyed at me, but I think it's probably safe to say games was the main reason people would buy an Amiga for most people.
100%, yeah.
It obviously could do the other stuff quite well, but that was the main reason. That's obviously not the case with the Mac. Certainly not then and not now, really. Yeah, Wolverine's Revenge was from the film, I think, the X-Men 2 film that had come out a couple of years, or the year before. I think it was based on that.
It got 8.3.
I think it was a PS2 game, yeah. But how would you there's no ads I've seen for control pads at all. I mean,
no.
I don't know if the Mac would easily handle like a USB. I don't know what the driver. I don't remember plugging in a controller. I might have done it for an emulator, and it might have actually worked. But you have to bind all the keys manually. Yeah, I think you probably could plug a generic USB controller into a Mac at this point in time, and Mac OS X would be able to handle it. That's probably how you would play a game like that. I think that's a PS2 game that got ported over.
I think so. I think I remember on the PS2. I mean, they're giving it 8.3, so it needs a Mac OS 10.2.6, 733 megahertz G4 processor, and must have 256 megabytes of RAM, and you need 1.7 gigabytes of hard drive space.
And
you need an ATI Radeon, or Radeon, I don't quite know how to say it, or an NVIDIA GeForce 2 card.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That probably would run on an iBook with a Mobility Radeon. Mine had 32 megabytes of video memory, which is insane, isn't it, when you think about it? Oh, good old Halo. There we go. Yes, there was a port of Halo for the Mac.
Oh, was there?
In fact, it was originally... Halo was supposed to be a Mac game.
Exactly,
you might not know this. It was originally supposed to be a Mac game. So... and then it became an Xbox exclusive, so the Mac version didn't happen until a couple of years later. But yeah, it came out on the Mac, and it ran on the G4 Macs. I don't think I ever messed with trying to get it running. But actually, yeah, I mean, I'm looking now, like the iPod. We touched upon that's the other kind of big device that Apple was selling at this point in time. Not counting other things they did like mice and keyboards and monitors. But there's basically just 3 iPods at this point in time. There's the Shuffle, which was kind of the candy bar sort of shape at this point in time. And that just had, the Shuffle had 512 meg or 1 gigabyte, and that was £69, including VAT. And then you had the iPod Mini, which was the smaller, looked similar to the regular iPod, but was a lot smaller. That came in 4 or 6 gig, so 1,000 songs in your pocket. And that was the cheapest one was $139, not bad. And you had the iPod Photo, which was the regular iPod but with a color screen. So that was a premium kind of model. You got 30 gig or 60 gig, and I think you could connect it to your Mac, which you did anyway for the music, but you could sync your iPhoto library to it. So you could show people stupid photos of yourself. And that was $248.99 for the 30 gig model. Decent amount of storage, to be fair. And the regular iPod, sort of the iPod Prime, whatever you want to call it, mono, which still had a mono screen, as did the Mini that I touched upon a second ago. That was 20 gig, and it was £209. So yeah, so that was all of the iPods. There was no Nano, there was no Touch, obviously. No iPhones, of course, at this point in time. So that was basically it. But at this point in time, I feel like around 2004 was when I suddenly started seeing iPods everywhere. Those distinctive white headphones. And when I first got mine, I think later in 2005, I was the reverse Halo effect. They'd always bang on about the iPod Halo effect, where people would buy an iPod made by Apple, and they would find out later that, they make computers as well. Which obviously is so funny for us to think about that, but genuinely people didn't know that. And they'd be like, I might try these computers that they make. So I was the other way around. I got a Mac, and I thought, well, I want to be able to take my music around with me, because Macs made it very easy with iTunes to rip your CDs, which I did do. I ripped my CD collection to it. I wanted a device to play those on. I was still using mini discs at this point in time, and later on in that year, I got an iPod, just the 20 gig, and I had that for years until really the iPhone took over. Yeah,
people don't realise that you did have other MP3 players, but the iPod was. When people would say, you can have 1,000 albums in your pocket and listen to them all, whenever you want, when you're going for a run, when you're on the train, if you're at home, whatever, that was really something else. And obviously, just a few years earlier, it was really CDs. And I remember I went travelling and I bought a portable CD player from Sony. And I bought one because it played discs, but it played discs that had MP3s on. So I could burn discs burn songs onto a CD. And then, so instead of having one album on a CD, I could have like 10 albums. And that's probably what we'll do in a year or two before this. And then this came out with everything all organised and just easy to use. And, it was like, oh, wow, actually, yeah, this is really good. This is the way the future's going. And in reality, now iPods are, obsolete. They're not obsolete, but they're, you can't purchase new ones anymore. Everything's in your phone now, isn't it? But
yeah,
it's quite crazy. But yeah, sort of go from one
Yeah.
to the other.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of similar in the end of the 90s. I was burning CDs, and then I had a portable CD player. But really, my main, obviously before then it would have been I had portable cassette players and things like that. But when it got to 2000 and onwards, I got myself a mini disc player, and at that point, you had mini disc long play, and you could basically have several CDs. On a single mini disc with long play. The quality would take a little bit of a hit, but it was still pretty good as an MP3. And that's what I would use. I would take that to college, to uni with me with a bundle of mini discs, and I would play them. And also the mini disc players were tiny. They were the size of a packet of fags, really, barely any bigger than the discs themselves, but still smaller than an iPod would have been of the same vintage. But yeah, it wasn't until 2005 that I went fully like MP3 in terms of, because I would also record MP3s onto mini discs. So I'd have a bunch of them on my computer, and I would just have the phono out from my whatever computer I had. Obviously, would have been probably my iMac. I think I would have been doing this with as well, my iBook, sorry. And I would just record off the line out onto a mini disc player. Because the mini disc would be able to, it would detect the gaps in the songs, the silence, and it would create a track break automatically. So I didn't really have to babysit it. I just put it on the background, play the music, come back to it an hour later and have on just some MP3s on the mini disc. So I'd do that. But yeah, eventually I would get an iPod, and obviously with iTunes, I'd stick everything in there, and it would fill out all the track names for you and all of that stuff, and that it was no turning back then. And I think ultimately we all moved to phones and having our music on phones, and that negated the need for a separate device. So yeah, that's kind of where I was at with that as well, Stu.
Yeah, that's it. It's interesting how. So I think I sort of ripped CDs to MP3s, but I still bought CDs, and I ripped them on my computer and stuff. And we're having the internet.
Yeah, same here.
And then I would, like everyone, I would download like one song, and that took an hour to download like one song because you had dial-up internet. So I had like a folder of about 20 or 30 individual songs that I liked, and that was a new song, that was an old song I liked, and then if you could find it online, you download it, and then so I had always a sort of a random folder full of old songs. But one thing you probably see on the screen, which I paused on, is I'm fascinated by these adverts. I'm going to keep on bringing them up. But there's an advert for Championship Manager, and they've made the Championship Manager season 03-04. They've put a little notice on there to make it look like a cigarette packet, saying playing may damage your sex life. And then they put a picture of a condom, which, expires May 1999. So implying that if you play this game, you're not going to have any sex for the next 3 years. I don't know how that's a great marketing ploy, but it's quite funny. And you think, hold on, would someone do an advert like this now? Maybe they wouldn't. I don't know.
Probably not. No.
Probably not. But yeah. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, they're really pushing Champman on the Mac there.
There are actually. We talked earlier about there are pages and pages of game stuff on here. So there is. I think this is
like a video, like a gaming special as well. I think so. It's probably not. I mean, the one I'm looking at, there's very little in terms of games. There is a little section, and they've reviewed like 3 or 4 games, but there's nothing. That I think has got they've dedicated an entire section to gaming as like a one-off thing. But yeah. And also, actually, the interesting thing, you might have seen it in yours as well, but the idea of having to buy an operating system, like buy the actual operating system in a big box with the disk inside. These shops are obviously selling copies of Mac OS X.
Really?
The current version is Panther. Obviously, it comes, when you buy a Mac, it's obviously built into it. You don't buy it, it comes with it. But it looks like, in fact, the one I'm looking at is there's a place called the Clearance Store, and they're selling Mac OS 9.2, just the CD though, not in a box, £34.
Oh my!
They're selling Microsoft Office 2004 is £198.
Oh my god,
so,
that'd be like £400 now. No wonder everyone had a dodgy copy back in the day. And one thing you just put up an interesting point, because obviously you've got Mac OS and you can just download it. It's basically free software, but you can use it on a Mac, which is obviously an Apple product which you've purchased. But still, PCs,
when there's a new version now, you don't have to buy a box. It's free, isn't it? You just upgrade your computer for free.
Exactly, but that's not the case with Windows. No, with Windows,
you buy a license.
You got to buy a license. If you got Windows 10, you can't upgrade to Windows 11 for free, can you? You would have to purchase it, right?
I'm pretty sure. I do recall. I think when 11 came out, they let everybody within the first year that had 10, like a real version, like not a pirated version of 10. I think maybe they gave it to you for free in the first few months.
I know they've done. I remember upgrading to Windows 10 for free at one point.
Or maybe it was upgrading to 10. Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah,
there was something they did where it was free for a little bit, but it wasn't a permanent thing. It was like a special thing to get people to migrate. But normally you'd have to go and buy it. Yeah,
it's still frustrating because if you let's say Mac OS. Now I use Mac OS on my MacBook Air, and there are no adverts on there for anything. There's not an advert in sight, and that's the next version. It always updates. You get it every 3 months, whenever. But then you pay for Windows, and there are adverts on there for
Absolutely,
stuff. And that's terrible. People go, obviously, Stuart, but that's terrible.
Yeah, it's certainly something that gets when you just want to log in and play your game, and you have to battle all the pop-ups and notifications and Teams wanting to update and turn on your OneDrive, and it's like, no, I don't want to do any of that. That's why I like Steam OS so much. But I'm looking at a company here actually on my copy that are selling Mac OS 10.3 Panther, which is the current version of the time. If you want to buy that, it's £99, and you get it in a big box. If you want a family pack, which is 5 users, so you can install it on 5 machines, that's £160. Interesting thing about that was there's no serial key. So you could take that single user edition and install it on as many computers as you want, and it makes no difference. Apple won't have a go at you or ban you or something. So it's kind of pointless getting the family version. I don't know why they sold it really, but funny one that.
There's something on here it's quite funny now, sort of looking at it. But exactly, you Mac OS 10.3 is £51 here. You can buy Keynote, that's £54. That's their version of PowerPoint, isn't it?
Yeah, it would have been the very early year. The very early years of that software.
Now, you have to buy, Adobe as games, not as a service, isn't it? You get the cloud, Adobe Creative Cloud or whatever.
You don't buy it in a box.
But this is Adobe Acrobat 6, £39. After Effects 6, £17. Creative Suite, £39. Go Live CS, £28. And then it's got the Photoshops and so on. I'm not going to sit here reading out prices, but
that'd be expensive.
So, but then actually, if you think about it, you go, okay, I'll buy all of these, and then you own them. You've got the disc. You'll use them for 3 years, but now you'll pay, I don't know, £50 a month to have all these things, and then if you don't pay after the 5th month, then they're all turned off, aren't they? You don't have access to them.
Basically, yeah. I mean, you can buy the entire Creative Suite, which includes InDesign, Photoshop, Illustrator, Go Live. You can buy the standalone version, £900. A lot of money, isn't it?
That is a lot of money. But saying that though, I mean that's a whole.
But it's yours forever.
If you're a marketing firm, then you can. I'm going to try and I'm going to ask you a question. Oh, Mini Pro mouse. Anyway, I was going to try and work out what's the most expensive bit of software on here, but the highest number I can see is a Mini Pro mouse by a company called Contour. But that's not software, is it? No? And Norton Internet Security, £60.
Yeah, that's it's interesting because obviously at this point, a big selling point of a Mac would be that you don't get viruses and things, and to a degree, that's still the case, isn't it? But you could still get an antivirus software, and there will still, I guess, there's nothing to stop you getting an attachment from a Windows user in an email that might have a virus. It won't affect your Mac, but you might want to, pick that up and get it deleted, sort of thing. So
it's quite interesting. Let's zoom out. Oh, it's just fascinating, this old magazine. Oh, scanners. Independence.
They're a big deal. And just to touch upon, when we were talking about Photoshop, you pay that £900, but you've got that for life. You can use that for as long as you want. It won't run out. You won't get kicked out for not paying a fee. It's basically yours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I know a lot of people, they go, oh no, I prefer the Photoshop from 2014 because I know where everything is and I know how to do everything, and then that's the one that you use until you might go, I'll get the 2021 version. It's not like FIFA where you buy, I have to buy it every year. It's more actually I'll stick with this one and until the features are so good on the new one that you kind of got to sort of move on, really.
Oh, here's something that's a bit fun as well. We were talking about the iPod a bit earlier. There obviously were other devices that came out that were similar functionality. One of the shops that I'm looking at in this copy of Macworld is selling the iRiver H10. It's got 5 gigabytes, so 2,500 songs, so nowhere near as much as closer to an iPod Mini at this point in time, weirdly enough. It's got an integrated touchpad to make browsing incredibly easy, and it's got a colour display built in, 260,000 colours, and an integrated FM tuner, and a built-in microphone to record voice. So a few little things over an iPod, in fact. But it costs £222. Probably falls down a little bit with the 5 gigabytes. A regular 20 gig iPod has it beat, but you don't have an FM tuner, and you don't have a color screen, and you don't have a voice recorder. So that's kind of interesting. Obviously, Macworld doesn't have any skin in the game for any of these, devices. The shops that they just these shops are advertising whatever they want to advertise. They're not shilling for Apple particularly. But yeah. And also like seeing how webcams are a separate thing here. The iSight webcam you have to buy separately. You could use other webcams on the Mac that would plug into one of the USB ports, but Apple had their own one. And that's the iSight webcam, although there's a company that's literally advertising it here, but they're not telling you how much they're charging for it. But yeah, had to get a separate webcam in these days, guys. So yeah, how quaint.
Yeah, I think I found the USB player page. Yeah, separate CDs and
it was all manner of crazy devices in these days, and that's we've basically run out of time now. So that was fascinating. I mean, right at the beginning, I said, I'm 20 years removed from when I started using Macs, and how much of a big jump is that versus the 20 years that were before I got one. And I think I would say, obviously there were the things that came up through that first 20 years is massive. Whereas, not a lot. It's not absolutely mind-bendingly different now to 2005. The iMac looks fairly similar to the 2005 iMac G5. It's just a bit thinner, and the bezels are more colourful. Obviously, we could talk about how much more powerful things are now. I'm not really trying to touch on that. But in terms of laptops, Yeah, the aluminium power books that you're looking at there look really modern and don't really look like that old. Not like the 90s laptops and they're beige and black and plasticky, chunky sort of chassis do. And obviously it's, in terms of music, the iPod range, it's completely gone now and has been for several years. I don't know when they stopped selling the iPod Classic, which is probably the last, link to the original iPod from 2001. That's, those separate devices are no longer needed, and phones were ubiquitous then, your Nokia 3310s, the likes of that. But now your phone is basically a mini computer that pretty much does everything in your pocket. And then there's other things that haven't changed as well. Like games are still not great in terms of how many you can get for the Mac. But I think Apple are probably in a better place now than they were in 2005. And they were doing okay in 2005. They were definitely on an upward curve. But yeah, some of the stuff that would happen in the subsequent years, like the iPhone and the iPad, would absolutely be mind-blowing. And, you've got like the MacBook Air now, which there wasn't a MacBook Air in those days. A 12-inch PowerBook G4 is probably the closest device to a small laptop. Although I've got a 15-inch MacBook Air, that's not small. And just, looking at all these things that, glancing them as you're going through there, like buying Microsoft Office in a big box and Mac
it's
OS
crazy.
10, Panther and all of that stuff. Mind-blowing, really is. But it was great to sort of walk through it with you, Stu, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
I think I'm certainly going to have a look at, trying to find other sort of old magazines, but it's interesting going back. And then I think one of the things you talked about, was, when you worked in the Apple store, and then there was on here, I think it's Computer Warehouse or something, and they had, come and visit our Apple store. And this was before,
exactly,
and they had it just looked like a little, one of those little computer shops.
A couple of banks of monitors,
Yeah, banks of monitors and, a display cabinet and things on shelves, on slatted walls. And it's just like, that's pretty basic.
Yeah, I mean, a fairly typical thing, which is actually, just as a very, very final thing to talk about. That's an interesting point because I think Computer Warehouse and Mac Warehouse, which I do remember advertising heavily in Macworld, they weren't so much, they were more like showrooms, like for a car. I don't think you'd really go and walk around them like you would in Dixon's or Curry's. You kind of would almost make an appointment or just turn up, and there would kind of be a reception area, and they would sort of show you to a showroom at the back, and the showroom would have everything out. There'd be iMacs out, PowerBooks out. There'd be software kind of placed on the shelves, and accessories and keyboards and hard drives and things. And you'd kind of be shown around by a person, trying to get you to buy all the stuff. And I think they were out in some kind of industrial estate. I don't think they were just in like a shopping centre.
No.
So yeah, you kind of had to make a point of going to these places. Really, you wouldn't just stumble across them. Like that one right there. I think they're actually trying to show you on the map there where they are, because they probably are.
Yeah, they always, come off at Junction 7, past the roundabout, over. Then when you got to Costco, you've gone too far. It's that type of sort of map, isn't it? But I would love to go back in time and just spend an hour just wandering through one of these old shops and picking up everything, and then just going, oh wow, look at that! Oh, look at that! Look how what things used to look like and stuff, and that'd be fascinating.
If I'd somehow could print some money to take with us and several £1,000, I'd probably buy a couple of Macs, bring them back and keep them in the box. Bring back a PowerBook or something. And sort of the battered ones are the only ones that we have available to us now on eBay. Exactly. So yeah. Anyway, Stu, where can you find us on the internet?
Oh, well, we're everywhere. So, first thing I want to mention, I don't know if people have been watching. I don't really think anyone watches, but I enjoy doing it. But I've been doing a bit more streaming recently. And now I've got myself a webcam, and I've got myself a new microphone. So it's just me playing games, as Steve Benway would say, playing games badly. but I enjoyed doing it. So if anyone wanted to put any comments on there and say, Stuart, you're rubbish, that'd be great. But yeah, so you can find us on YouTube, search Console Shock, Facebook, search Console Shock. You can find us on any podcast client, again, search Console Shock, and then you'll be able to find us, and we can, that's it really.
Cool. Yeah, check out those streams that Stu's knocking out. There's going to be more of them, I'm sure. Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this little trip back to sort of 2004, 2005. And we're definitely going to try and do this again. I think Amiga format's got to be the one we do next. We've talked about it plenty of times.
Amiga format, yeah.
I think people would really enjoy that. But yeah, thanks as always for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.